very much, Mr. Hollowbone, and I'd also like to thank the Minister for the diligent way in which he's dealing with this matter. We on these benches support these regulations. It's vitally important that the government takes a tough line on terrorism and uses all the instruments available at its disposal to limit the ability of terrorists to operate. This includes sanctioning individuals and prohibiting certain activities, such as those that have been laid out today. To that end, we are satisfied that, as the Minister has explained, these sanctions will aid the investigation and prevention of terrorist financing, prevent designated persons acting as charity trustees and managing or operating sensitive financial enterprises, and enable the effective implementation of legal, operational and regulatory measures for combating terrorist financing. We recognise the need for these new provisions as they ensure that our legislation will be effective once the transition period comes to an end. But having said that, for sanctions to be effective and robust, they should not operate in isolation and should instead be applied in close coordination with our democratic allies and partners, not least the European Union. So could I take this opportunity to ask the Minister what conversations he's having and what mechanisms are being put in place to ensure that the UK is working hand in hand with the European Union to effectively apply the coordinated approach to sanctions, which we know makes them so much more effective. There is little hope of these sanctions working effectively unless liberal democracies, and particularly our EU partners and ourselves, work together effectively to apply pressure. I'd also like to raise the question of what additional work the Minister is doing to strengthen the UK's sanctions regime. I'm very pleased, and we are on these benches, that the government finally implemented the so-called Magnitsky sanctions against many human rights abusers. But we do have two concerns in that regard. First, the legislation does not include corruption. Foreign Office ministers say they're looking into including corruption in the scope of that legislation, but could the Minister provide an update on when we might expect an answer on whether corruption can be included in scope? And second, the sanctions don't appear to be being applied across the board. It took the government just a matter of days to sanction Belarusian officials following the rigged elections and crackdown that ensued. But we are yet to see any Chinese Communist Party officials on the sanctions list, despite clear and apparent human rights violations in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. The government has stated that it's looking into this, but would the Minister be able to provide an update in that regard? We're also content to see the terrorist financing definition being brought up to date, and that, as the Minister recently put it, it allows the government, under Section 49 of the Sanctions Act, to facilitate the prevention, detection or investigation of terrorist financing following the revocation of a number of the current offences by the 2019 regulations. However, just one final question here about why the revocation of these offences occurred and why everything we're going through wasn't dealt with in the 2019 legislation first time round. I would like to thank the Minister for his time today and look forward to future dialogue on these important issues.